very much, everybody, for coming today. Not a bad wee crowd here. The first speaker that you're going to hear is John Ross, and he's going to cover the statute of limitations. I'm sure we will all have varied views on it, but this is the views of our particular group. So I'll hand you over now to John Ross.
It's not working? It takes an expert to work a mic. Want me up there? You probably have a fall. Fellow veterans, friends, today we stand here together in the centre of our capital city, proud with heads held high. We stand proud of our service in the past to confront and hold a line against murderous Republican terrorists, hell-bent on destroying our very existence. The evil that waged that murderous campaign over 4 decades is still present today, still working to destroy this country we dearly love. Sadly, through cowardly and traitorous politicians, those who in the past lurked in the shadows now hold positions of power in a society they despise, positions that allow them to continue their evil campaign unabated. They have no interest in justice. They care nothing about the victims that their actions created. We are aware, more than most, of the life of suffering endured by many in our country today. Families who lost loved ones in the defence of this country. Men and women brutally butchered by depraved cowards, many simply going about their daily work, maintaining the business, maintaining normality in this community. They manufacture and promote victimhood. They fabricate inequality. They deceive the naive in society. Inevitably, the mask slips. Just remember the words of not so long ago. Equality is a Trojan horse. We must never forget the horrors of the past, and we must never allow those responsible to rewrite history, and in doing so, sanitize and legitimize the sordid past of murder and mayhem. To our country's eternal shame, the rewriting of history has been fueled and abated by the very politicians we served. Through their cowardice and appeasement to terrorists, which still goes on. Many were duped by the lies and duplicity of the agreement in 1998, when Blair and his government lied to the people of this province. That agreement and the side deals and concessions made to Republican terrorists back then paved the way that enabled them to control the judiciary in Northern Ireland and embark on their campaign to demonise and criminalise Crown forces. A prominent local politician faced a barrage of criticism only this year when she made comparisons to feeding crocodiles and giving concessions to terrorists. They come back for more, says she. My friends, Republican terrorists have been feasting on the menu of concessions at Stormont since 1998. And we are here today to ensure that our Crown Force veterans, currently under investigation and facing the courts for carrying out their lawful duties, do not become a course on that menu of appeasement. Bear with me. I say again, Republicans have no interest in justice. Justice is anathema to them. Their sole aim in driving their agenda to pursue and criminalise Crown forces is to legitimise the heinous and murderous actions of their terrorists. I say here today loud and clear, there never has been, there never will be equivalence between legally deployed Crown forces upholding the rule of law, protecting life and property, the very fabric of society in this country, and those who set out in their murderous missions and destruction, fueled by contempt and hatred for those who did not support their evil and illegitimate campaign. Le Mans, Darkley, Bloody Friday, T-Ban, Kings Mills, Warren Point, Enniskillen, Frizzell's. I could stand here for many hours listening to the atrocities and the names of the innocents slaughtered by premeditated evil, regardless of religious or political belief. All gathered here today will never forget. Whilst I hear the public cries of all who died during the murderous campaign being equal, I become enraged. Those terrorists who chose to embark on a mission heavily armed and equipped to murder police in Loughgall, who were thankfully stopped in their tracks by an excellent intelligence-led lawful military mission which saved innocent lives, can never be considered as victims on a par with those defenceless souls murdered in cold blood by the hands of those same terrorists. I completed my first tour of duty in Belfast, my hometown, as a just turned 18-year-old parachute regiment soldier, 1971. I was to do many more tours in the 70s, 80s and 90s throughout this province, just like many of us stood here today. Whatever Crown Force uniform we wore and whatever role we played at any given time, we always acted within the rule of law. Many of our brothers lost their lives upholding the principle of law. Murders were committed by those we knew to be terrorists, responsible for evils beyond the comprehension of everyday society. We had the capability to eradicate those people, save lives, but the law did not allow it. Evil men had protection of law which allowed them to murder at will. Never in my 23 years service on the occasions I was deployed to Northern Ireland did I leave the confines of whatever base I was in with murder in mind. And I know that applies to all stood here today. We left our bases to protect life, to protect the vulnerable from terrorists with unjustified murderous intent. We must never accept the Republican agenda of establishing equivalence. There is no equivalence between right and wrong, no equivalence between good and evil, no equivalence between the innocent and the guilty. And I say shame on all our politicians who are willing to accept a statute of limitations applicable to both those who waged an unjust and illegal campaign of murder and those who bravely and legally opposed him. Any action which resulted in the loss of life attributable to Crown Forces was fully investigated at the time of the incident. Today we have soldiers, many in their twilight years and ill health, who have shamefully been subjected to aggressive early morning arrests when there is no new evidence against them. In the dark days of the past, when the murderous Republican terrorist campaign was raging in this province, our Crown Forces face danger each and every day. 1,100 men and women serving in Crown Forces lost their lives. I would ask that you take a moment to reflect on that number. 1,100 murdered at the behest of those who now seek parity of esteem between their perpetrators of evil and those brave souls who made the ultimate sacrifice for others. We must never accept equivalence in any form between Republican terrorists and those who legally stood against them. And so I turn to what is being proposed by some of our politicians and others who should know better. A proposal made solely for political expedience, a proposal that offers yet further appeasement to terrorists, a proposal that effectively gives them the equivalence they crave and demand. I listened to some speak after the last Veterans Rally here in Belfast, where they openly called for equal treatment for terrorists and crime forces. I say shame on them. Of course we do not want and will never accept any soldier being incarcerated for doing their duty. It is within the gift of our national government to introduce legislation to halt the witch hunt being waged against veterans today. Any legislation, regardless of its title, must be unequivocal in its application to Crown Forces only. A private member's bill at Westminster had its first reading on Wednesday, the 1st of November. It was undoubtedly raised with sound intent by a former Army officer, Richard Benyon, now sitting as a Conservative MP. A private member's bill gives a member 10 minutes at its first reading. 10 minutes. They rarely reach the statute book unless the sitting government embrace and support it. We must use every means at our disposal to pressurise those MPs who represent us throughout the UK, to pressurise the government to enact legislation, and they can call it what they like, but that legislation must be applicable to Crown Forces only. Nothing less will do. At the last count, there were 51 MPs across the various parties at Westminster who are military veterans. A powerful internal lobby. I have yet to see any concerted effort from that collective group to oppose the injustices faced by veterans today. We served Queen and country regardless of which political party was in power. The service of our armed forces, past and present, sits above party politics. Whilst there are those who sit at Westminster, should have had a helper. Who have no love for our armed forces, either past or present, and we only know too well who they are. Those sitting veteran MPs must come together in defence and support of those they once served alongside. This can be achieved through every veteran, their families and friends, everyone who cares, who is a veteran MP representing them, to demand action from them. Never forget the power to remove MPs rests with those who elect them. We have the numbers to influence their decisions or remove them for office. Be brave, be demanding, be ruthless. They will listen if we shout loud in numbers. There has been too many concessions made to protect terrorist murderers. Comfort letters that have effectively pardoned those guilty of heinous crimes, being but one. We must demand that no statute of limitations is legislated that is applicable to all. We must never accept any legislation that establishes equivalence. Of course, it will be spun by those more capable than me in articulating lies, that a general SOL is the best way forward. Do not be fooled. If equivalence is ever considered or conceded to cold-blooded, ruthless killers, then it will not stop there. Those same people will attempt to rubbish what I say, just as there were those who said terrorists would never sit in the heart of government in Northern Ireland. The appetite of the proverbial crocodile is insatiable, and if equivalence was ever established, then equal treatment in terms of pension and medallic recognition for their murdering volunteers will follow. This is not pie in the sky, my friends. Those who engaged in the treacherous Easter uprising in 1916, when our country was at war defending freedom, shamefully received medals and pensions for their treacherous, murderous uprising. That recognition included the families of those lawfully executed. The same treatment is high on the Republican demand list today. It must never be allowed. Their atrocities must always be recorded in history as the heinous, cowardly crimes they were, deserving of no recompense. So So my call to you all here today and beyond is, we must be strong in our resolve to confront the ongoing threat we face. We must be aware and thwart any attempt to establish equivalence between our up-banner legally deployed Crown forces and those terrorists who engaged in an unjustified and illegal campaign of murder and destruction. We must never accept a statute of limitations that results in equivalence between those who were the innocent victims of terrorists, those murdered in cold blood, and those same terrorists lawfully killed thus engage in murderous acts, and those who live on today who have escaped justice. Dennis Hutchings may be the first soldier to face charges for the killing of an IRA suspect in 1974. The incident was investigated then, and it was found there was no case to answer.
Thank you.
Dennis is 75 years old and in poor health. Despite an earlier judicial hearing which established little likelihood of Dennis being convicted of attempted murder, this decision was overruled by the DPP in Northern Ireland. I am certainly no legal expert, but my belief is that any prosecution brought must have a reasonable chance of success and must be in the public interest. The case against Dennis fails on both counts. The case against Dennis is politically motivated and wrong. More will follow, and many veterans and their families are going through hell today when they should, in our national month of remembrance, be thinking of lost comrades and reflecting on their own honourable service when they volunteered to defend our country. Whilst the fight to halt the injustices against Crown forces continues, we must never lose sight of Dennis's plight and others who may find themselves facing a court in Northern Ireland. They must never be abandoned, and I would call on all here today to be at Dennis's side if and when he faces court. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I would finish with words close to the hearts of many here today, meaningful words as we relentlessly drive up the hard road to justice. And I hope I get this right. Fakabala!